No one in the village could remember the last time they saw her drink from a cup. While others gathered around clay pots and metal basins, lifting clean water to their lips, she turned away. Every time. At dawn. At noon. At night. Instead, she walked past the wells, past the gourds, past the hands offering help, and went straight to the river. The same river everyone else feared. They whispered that the water was wrong. That it carried sickness. That animals refused to drink from it upstream. Some said children who fell in came out burning with fever. Others swore the river listened, and remembered. Yet there she was, kneeling at the muddy edge, lowering her face without hesitation, drinking slowly as if the water were gentle, as if it welcomed her. She never rushed, never flinched, even when her hands trembled, even when her lips cracked from weakness. People watched from a distance, frozen between disgust and dread. Why would anyone choose that? They asked. When the dry season came, and the village water grew scarce, fear turned into anger. Mothers pulled their children away from her shadow. Elders shook their heads. Some said she was cursed. Others said she was hiding something terrible. And then, one morning, a child followed her to the river, and saw something no one was supposed to see. The village woke the same way it always did. Before the sun fully rose, smoke drifted gently from cooking fires, thin and blue against the pale morning sky. Roosters crowed from uneven fences. Bare feet pressed into cool dirt as women stepped outside with clay pots balanced effortlessly on their heads. Children yawned, rubbing sleep from their eyes, their laughter still soft, not yet loud enough to chase the night away. Water was life here. It shaped the rhythm of every day. At the center of the village stood the well, old, reliable, ringed with smooth stones polished by generations of hands. People gathered there in small groups, talking as they waited their turn. News traveled faster than footsteps at the well. Births, arguments, marriages, worries about the coming heat, everything passed through that circle. Nearby, under the shade of a wide acacia tree, elders sat on low stools, their voices calm and slow, like time itself. They spoke of seasons, of rain patterns, of how the land remembered those who respected it. To them, water was not just something you drank. It was shared, protected, honored. At midday, the village softened. The sun pressed down hard, and life moved into the shadows. Women rinsed grain in shallow basins. Children splashed one another near storage jars, scolded but never truly stopped. Someone always laughed. Someone always sang. Even in hardship, there was a quiet balance, an understanding of how things were meant to be. No one drank alone if it could be helped. If a traveler passed through, a cup was offered. If a neighbor fell sick, water was carried to their door. Refusing water, especially when it was clean and given freely, was more than strange. It was unsettling. It broke an unspoken rule. That was why people noticed her absence long before they noticed anything else. She was never part of the morning line at the well. Never under the acacia tree with a cup in her hands. When the sun burned hottest and throats grew dry, she was nowhere near the basins or jars. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. She simply wasn't there. At first, people assumed she had already come and gone. Then days passed. Then weeks. Someone mentioned it casually, as people often do when they don't yet realize they're afraid. A woman paused mid-sentence and frowned. A man shrugged but looked toward the path leading out of the village. Small glances began to follow the same direction. Beyond the last huts, past the fields where cassava leaves rustled in the breeze, lay the river. Most people only went there to wash clothes or gather reeds, and even then, not for long. The river was part of life, yes, but it was also unpredictable. Its moods changed. Its water darkened without warning. It was respected from a distance. The village preferred what was contained, controlled, understood. By late afternoon, the well was quieter. Pots were full. Fires crackled again as evening approached. The smell of cooked grain and stewed vegetables drifted through the air. Families gathered close, sharing bowls, passing cups from hand to hand. Still, there was one place left empty. A space where a woman should have been sitting. Someone finally said her name out loud. The word hung in the air longer than it should have. No one answered. They spoke her name softly at first, as if saying it too loudly might summon something they weren't ready to face. She had lived in the village for as long as most people could remember, yet no one could say exactly when she arrived. There was no story of her coming, no celebration, no farewell from another place. One day, she was simply there, quietly taking part in the rhythm of village life without ever placing herself at its center. She was not old, but life had already written itself clearly on her face. Her eyes carried a depth that made people lower their gaze without knowing why. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if listening to something others could not hear. When she spoke, which was rare, her voice was gentle and measured. Never sharp. Never defensive. She helped without being asked. If a child fell, she was the first to lift them. If grain spilled, her hands gathered it patiently from the dirt. When elders needed firewood carried or herbs sorted, she worked silently beside them, never complaining, never expecting thanks. Yet she remained apart. She did not linger in conversation. She did not join laughter for long. And when cups were passed from hand to hand, she always found a reason to step away. At first, people thought it was modesty. Then they thought it was pride. Only later did they begin to suspect it was something else entirely. They noticed the path she took at certain hours, early in the morning, when the air was still cool, and again at dusk, when the light softened and shadows stretched long. She walked beyond the fields, past the last line of trees, toward the sound everyone recognized but rarely followed. The river. Some claimed they had seen her kneeling there, her knees pressed into wet earth, her hands steady as she leaned forward. Others said she drank as if she were praying. Slowly, carefully, as though every swallow mattered. What unsettled people most was not that she drank river water. It was that she drank nothing else. During the hottest days, when throats burned and tongues cracked, she refused even a single sip from the well. Women offered her cups with concern in their eyes. Men tried to reason with her. Once, an elder spoke firmly, reminding her of tradition, of safety, of respect for the village's ways. She listened. She always listened. Then she lowered her head slightly and stepped back, as if the answer lived somewhere inside her silence. "Why?" someone finally asked her directly, unable to hold the question any longer. She looked at them for a long moment. Not with fear. Not with defiance. With something closer to sorrow. "It is enough," she said quietly. That was all. No explanation. No story. No warning. Just two words that settled heavily in the air and left behind more questions than before. Children began to watch her with open curiosity. Some followed her at a distance, stopping when she turned, pretending to chase insects or stones. Mothers called them back sharply, uneasy with something they could not name. Whispers spread. Some said she was punishing herself. Others believed she was bound by a vow made long ago. A few suggested darker things, that the river had claimed her, that she belonged to it now. Still, she remained the same. Kind. Gentle. Uncomplaining. And each day, as the village drank from what it trusted, she walked alone toward what everyone else feared, carrying a secret she refused to explain, and a calm that made people wonder whether she knew something they did not. Something waiting, just beneath the surface. It did not take long for the village to decide that silence was no longer acceptable. At first, the changes were small, easy to dismiss if one wanted to. She began to look thinner. Her shoulders sloped forward slightly, as if carrying an invisible weight. Her steps, once steady, slowed just enough for people to notice. When she knelt by the fire to help prepare meals, she rested her hand on the ground before standing again. "River water weakens the body," someone muttered. "Or poisons it," another replied. Concern mixed with suspicion, and the line between the two grew thinner each day. One afternoon, as the sun pressed hard against the earth, she stumbled near the well. It wasn't dramatic, no fall, no cry, but it was enough. A woman rushed forward and pressed a cup into her hands before she could step away. "Drink," she said, not unkindly. "Just this once." For a moment, everyone went quiet. The woman looked down at the cup. Clear water shimmered inside it, reflecting the sky. Her fingers tightened around the rim. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Hesitation, sharp and brief. Then she gently set the cup back into the other woman's hands. "I can't," she said. "Why?" the woman insisted, her voice cracking. "What are you afraid of?" The question hung there, heavy and unanswered. She shook her head slowly, as if the words were too large to carry. "It's not fear." That was all she offered. From that day on, people watched her more closely. Every trip to the river became an event, followed from a distance by worried eyes. Children counted how long she stayed. Elders whispered about omens and balance, about what happened when someone refused what the community shared. Rumors took on new shapes. Some claimed the river cured her of a sickness she refused to name. Others believed it was draining her, binding her life to its current. A few began to wonder if she was guarding something, though they could not say what. Then the river itself began to change. Not in obvious ways. The water did not vanish. It did not flood. But its surface darkened earlier in the evenings, swallowing the last light faster than before. Fish grew scarce near the banks. When people washed their clothes, the fabric came away smelling faintly of iron and earth. Still, she kept going. One evening, an elder followed her. He stayed far back, careful not to be seen, his staff sinking softly into the soil with each step. He watched as she knelt at the river's edge, her posture careful, almost reverent. Before drinking, she paused, placing her palm flat against the water as if feeling its pulse. The elder's breath caught. He could not hear what she whispered, but he saw her lips move. When she finished, she did something she had never done before. She bowed her head. Not in exhaustion. Not in prayer. In apology. The elder returned to the village shaken, unable to explain what he had seen. His words came out wrong, tangled, incomplete. Instead of calming fears, they fed them. That night, someone said the river was taking payment. The next morning, a child woke with a fever after playing too close to the water. By midday, 2 more were ill. Mothers gathered in tight circles, eyes darting toward the path that led beyond the fields. All of them thought the same thing. She knew. Whatever was happening, whatever was coming, she had known all along. The river was no longer something the village could ignore. Its presence pressed into daily life like an unspoken warning. People avoided its banks now, sending children in the opposite direction and washing clothes in hurried silence. Even the sound of flowing water, once soothing, felt sharper, as if it carried meaning that refused to stay hidden. And still, she walked toward it. Each morning, she left before the sun fully rose. Each evening, she returned just as the sky deepened into purple and ash. Her routine never changed, even as the village's fear grew louder. What did change was her body. Her face grew paler. Dark shadows settled beneath her eyes. Sometimes her hands shook so badly she had to steady herself against a tree before continuing. Yet she never asked for help. Never complained. When someone offered food or water, she smiled softly and refused, as if protecting them from something they did not understand. That frightened people more than anger ever could. Whispers turned into arguments. "She's hurting herself," one man said. "No," another replied. "She's choosing this." The elders called a meeting beneath the acacia tree. Voices overlapped. Words like danger, curse, and balance passed from mouth to mouth. Some believed she should be stopped, for her own good or for the village's safety. Others feared that interfering would make things worse. In the end, concern won over patience. 2 women followed her one afternoon, staying close enough that she noticed. She did not turn around. She did not quicken her pace. When she reached the river, she knelt as always. "This has gone too far," one woman said, her voice shaking. "You're hurting yourself. You're frightening our children." She looked up slowly. Her eyes were calm, but tired. Deeply tired. "If I stop," she said quietly, "it will not end." "What won't end?" the other woman demanded. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever lived behind her silence pressed hard against her expression, but she held it back. "I can't explain," she said. "Not yet." Those words spread through the village like fire. Not yet. That night, the river swelled. Not enough to flood, but enough to creep closer to the fields. The waterline advanced in small, deliberate movements, swallowing patches of earth that had been dry for years. Frogs croaked loudly, then fell silent all at once. Dogs refused to go near the sound of water. People woke in the dark, listening. By morning, the fear had teeth. The elders decided she could no longer go alone. If she insisted on drinking from the river, someone would watch. Not to protect her, but to understand her. Or stop her, if necessary. When they told her, she did not resist. She only nodded. At the river, under the gaze of the entire village, she did something different. Before drinking, she stepped into the water. Only a little, just enough to soak the hem of her clothes. She closed her eyes and stood still as the current moved around her ankles. Her lips moved again, whispering words no one could hear. Then she bent down and drank. The water rippled outward in slow, widening circles. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground beneath the riverbank trembled, so faintly it might have been imagined. Birds burst from nearby trees. A low sound rose from the water, not loud, but deep. The villagers stepped back. In fear. She remained where she was. When she finally turned to face them, her expression was not one of relief. It was one of urgency. "Please," she said, her voice barely above the river's murmur. "You must stay away." "From the river?" someone shouted. She shook her head. "From what's coming?" And for the first time, no one doubted that she was telling the truth. Fear has a way of changing people faster than truth ever can. By the next morning, the village felt different. Conversations stopped when she passed. Doors closed more quickly. Children were pulled close, as if danger walked beside her. What had once been quiet concern had hardened into something sharper, something defensive. The elders met again, this time without waiting for the sun to soften. Their voices were low, urgent. They spoke of responsibility, of protecting the many over the one. Whatever she was doing, whatever she claimed was coming, was now seen as a threat that could no longer be tolerated. When they called her forward, the entire village gathered. She stood alone in the open space near the well, thin and steady, her hands folded calmly in front of her. Around her, faces were tight with fear and frustration. Some were angry. Others looked ashamed for feeling that way. "You must stop going to the river," an elder said at last. "Whatever this is, it is dividing us." She listened, as she always did. "If you do not," another added, "we will stop you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She raised her eyes slowly. "If I stop," she said, "you will not have time." "Time for what?" someone shouted. Her silence returned, heavier than before. That was when the drought began. Not gradually. Not as a slow warning. It arrived like a door slamming shut. The well dropped faster than anyone had ever seen. Buckets scraped stone by midday. By evening, the water tasted sharp and wrong. Panic spread. People rushed to fill containers, arguing, pushing. The balance that had held the village together for generations cracked in a single afternoon. Mothers cried. Elders argued over rituals that had not been used in years. And through it all, the river continued to flow. Dark. Steady. Unchanged. The realization struck like a blow. They went to her. This time, there were no threats. No raised voices. Only desperation. "You said we would not have time," an elder whispered. "Time for what?" She closed her eyes. "For choice," she said. That night, the first death came. An old man who had drawn water from the well all his life fell ill suddenly. His breath grew shallow. His skin burned. By morning, he was gone. The healer shook her head in confusion. Nothing made sense. The village broke. Grief turned into blame. Some accused the river. Others accused her. Voices rose. Hands pointed. Someone shouted that she had brought this upon them, that whatever bargain she had made was now costing lives. They surrounded her. "You will tell us the truth," a man demanded. "No." For the first time, she looked afraid. Not for herself. For them. She looked past the crowd, toward the dark line of trees, toward the sound of water moving where it always had. Her chest rose and fell as if she were steadying herself against a weight too heavy to carry alone. "I never wanted you to know like this," she said. Thunder rolled in the distance, though the sky remained clear. "The river is sick," she continued. And it is angry. A gasp moved through the crowd. She lifted her trembling hands. Long ago, something was taken from it. Something buried and forgotten. Since then, it has been feeding slowly, through the ground, through the wells. The healer's face went pale. Then why are you still alive? Someone whispered. She swallowed. Because I drink it first. Silence fell so hard it felt like the earth itself was listening. Before anyone could speak, a cry rose from the edge of the village. Another child had collapsed. And suddenly, the truth was no longer something they could deny. It was something they had to face, together or not at all. The village moved as one body now, driven by fear and urgency. They carried the child into the shade, laying her gently on woven mats. The healer worked in silence, her hands moving quickly, her brow damp with sweat. The child's breathing was shallow, uneven. Around them, mothers clutched their children tighter, as if grip alone could keep danger away. All eyes kept drifting back to the woman. She stood a little apart, her shoulders drawn inward, as though bracing against something invisible. The words she had spoken echoed in every mind. Because I drink it first. An elder stepped forward, his voice unsteady. You said the river is sick. What does that mean? She hesitated, then nodded slowly, as if accepting something she had delayed for too long. When I was young, she began, this river was different. Clear. Gentle. It fed the land without asking anything in return. Her voice remained calm, but her hands trembled. One season, the earth gave us a gift, black soil beneath the fields, rich and strong. The village dug deep to claim it. Deeper than we ever had before. The elders exchanged glances. They broke through a place that should have been left alone, she continued. A burial ground. Old. Forgotten. The bones of those who once guarded the river's source. A low sound passed through the crowd, not quite a word, not quite a cry. They moved the bones, she said. They burned some, buried others elsewhere. The river swallowed what it could not forgive. The healer sank back onto her heels. That was the year the fevers began, the healer whispered. We never understood why. The woman nodded. The river did not take revenge quickly. It waited. It seeped into the ground, into the wells. It learned patience from us. A young man shook his head. Then why didn't you tell us before? Her eyes filled, though no tears fell. Because the river demanded balance, she said. Not punishment. Not fear. A keeper. She lifted her chin slightly. Someone to carry its sickness so it would not spread. A long silence followed. An elder's voice broke it, barely audible. And you agreed. I was already drinking from it when I learned the truth, she replied. By then, it had marked me. It would not let me go. The healer looked up sharply. Marked how? The woman turned her palms upward. For the first time, people noticed the faint discoloration beneath her skin, dark lines branching like roots, subtle but unmistakable. Signs they had dismissed as fatigue, as age, as nothing at all. It stays in me, she said. As long as it can. A woman in the crowd began to cry. Then the drought, an elder said slowly. The sickness, it's because the river is tired, she finished. And because I am. The child on the mat stirred suddenly, gasping. The healer leaned forward, then froze. She's cooler, the healer said in disbelief. Her fever is breaking. All eyes snapped back to the woman. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against a tree, breathing hard. The river gives back what it takes, she whispered. But only while I stand. Panic surged. If you die, someone began. She closed her eyes. Then it will find another way. The meaning settled slowly, heavily. They had not been cursed. They had been protected. At a cost so quiet, so constant, no one had seen it happening, until the protection began to fail. And now, with the truth finally rising to the surface, the village faced a question far more terrifying than fear. What do you do when survival depends on someone else's suffering? The village did not speak for a long time. The truth lay between them like an open wound, raw, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Faces once hardened by fear softened into something else entirely. Horror, yes. But also shame. An elder stepped forward, his voice low and heavy. You said the river demanded a keeper. What does that truly mean? She took a slow breath. It means the sickness cannot disappear, she said. It must live somewhere. Long ago, the guardians bound it to ritual and remembrance. When their bones were disturbed, the binding broke. She looked toward the river, dark and patient. The river remembers everything. It does not forget harm. It only waits for balance. And you became that balance, the healer said quietly. She nodded. I did not choose it fully. But once it touched me, the choice was no longer mine alone. They listened now, not as judges, not as a crowd, but as witnesses. Each time I drink from the river, she continued, I take what would otherwise spread through the ground, through the wells, through the children. Her voice wavered for the first time. It weakens me because it is not meant to live inside a human body. A mother covered her mouth with trembling hands. The drought, an elder whispered. Was that the river, too? Yes, she replied. The river pulled back when it sensed I could no longer carry enough. It was not punishing you. It was warning you. The meaning settled slowly, painfully. She had not been stubborn. She had been holding the line. For years, she said, the river and I made an agreement. As long as I returned to it, as long as I carried its sickness, it would spare the village. Someone choked back a sob. And if you stop? Her answer came without hesitation. Then the wells will poison you faster than I ever could. The healer stood, her face wet with tears. There must be another way. A ritual. A cleansing. The woman shook her head gently. The old ways died with the guardians. The river no longer trusts many voices. Only one. She straightened with effort, drawing strength from somewhere deep within. But that does not mean this must continue forever. Hope flickered. She turned to the elders. The bones that were taken must be returned. The ground must be reopened. The river must be acknowledged, not feared, not controlled, but honored. And until then, an elder asked. Until then, she said, I remain. The child on the mat sat up suddenly, blinking in confusion. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The healer checked her pulse, her breath, then looked up in disbelief. She's well. At the same moment, a murmur rose from the river. The waterline receded slightly, exposing damp earth where none had been before. The woman swayed. People rushed forward, catching her before she fell. For the first time, she did not pull away. You should have told us, someone whispered through tears. She looked at them, really looked at them, her eyes filled with exhaustion and love. You would have tried to stop me, she said softly. And the river would not have waited. Understanding struck deep and sharp. Her silence had not been secrecy. It had been protection. Not just from the river, but from guilt, from impossible choices, from the knowledge that their lives were balanced on her slow, quiet suffering. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The river does not want worship, she whispered. It wants remembrance. As night fell, the village finally understood. The woman who drank only river water had not been cursed. She had been carrying the village on her own body. And she was running out of strength. The night the village changed, no drums were played. Fires burned low and quiet, their light trembling against the walls of the huts. No one slept. People sat close together, wrapped in blankets, listening not for danger, but for understanding. At dawn, they went to the river together. For the first time in generations, no one stood back. The elders led the way, carrying tools, woven mats, and bowls of clean earth. The healer walked beside the woman, supporting her with every step. She was lighter now, as if part of her had already begun to fade, but her eyes were calm. They dug where she pointed. The soil was heavy, dark, and resistant, as though it remembered being disturbed. When the first bone emerged, smooth, pale, unmistakable, a sob broke from the crowd. One by one, the remains of the old guardians were uncovered and laid gently into the ground near the river's source. No words were spoken. None were needed. When the last bone was returned, the The elders poured water from the river over the earth, not as an offering, but as an apology. The current shifted, slow and deliberate, as if listening. The woman knelt with effort. She pressed her palm into the wet soil, the same way she had pressed it into the river countless times before. "I kept my promise," she whispered. The water stirred. The dark lines beneath her skin began to fade, not all at once, but enough for the healer to gasp. Color returned slowly to her face. Her breathing deepened. The river had accepted the remembrance. By midday, the well rose. Clear water filled the stone basin, cool and sweet. People tasted it carefully at first, then cried openly as relief washed over them. Children laughed again. The drought loosened its grip. And for the first time in years, the woman drank from a cup. She held it with both hands, hesitating, as if afraid to trust the moment. When she finally lifted it to her lips, the village watched in silence. Nothing terrible happened. She smiled, small, tired, but real. In the days that followed, life returned to its rhythm, but it was no longer the same. People spoke more softly near the river. Children were taught its history, not as a warning, but as a responsibility. The woman did not leave the village. She no longer walked alone. When she passed the well, cups were offered, not out of fear, but gratitude. She accepted them now, though she still visited the river, not to drink, but to sit and listen. Sometimes she said nothing at all. Sometimes she told children stories about balance, about how the land gives and takes, and how forgetting has a cost. The elders planted trees along the riverbank, their roots reaching deep, anchoring the soil that had once been violated. Each tree marked a promise. Years later, when strangers asked why the river was treated with such care, the villagers would answer simply, "Because once, someone loved us enough to suffer in silence." And in that answer lived the true lesson. What seems strange is not always wrong. What looks like weakness may be sacrifice. And sometimes, the quietest person in the village is the one holding everyone else alive. The river flowed on. So did the story. And no one ever forgot the woman who drank its pain so others could drink its peace.